As college basketball season is in full swing, we bring on one of the best in the business when it comes to talking college basketball. He's had stints with Fox Sports, CBS Sports, ESPN, Stadium, The Messenger, you name it. This man is all over the place. Also, the owner, the operator, the founder, what have you, of the Field of 68. You've probably seen them on social media talking all things college basketball, especially the late night for us late night owls, if you will, getting our college basketball fix. We bring in our good friend, Jeff Goodman. Again, one of the best in the business. You've definitely seen him if you're a college basketball fan. Jeff, thank you so much for taking the time. It's truly an honor to speak with you, man. What's going on?
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. And listen, SEC hoops is fun. I know football's king, but man, SEC hoops, and we got to give the late Mike Slav a lot of credit because he ramped it up years ago. And honestly, it's really fun because there's a lot of really good coaches in the league. The depth of the league is really good. I remember again when it was, Kentucky and Florida, and I remember Slav telling Billy Donovan, listen, you got to ramp up your non-conference schedule. You got to be kind of the cornerstone program along with Kentucky. And now you've got so many of them right now that are nationally relevant every year.
Jeff, let's start there because I think that's really intriguing. Like you mentioned, you look back, say, just a decade ago. I mean, the SEC looked completely different on the hardwood. What do you think changed the most? I mean, I think that you can point to, and the low-hanging fruit is the coaching. I mean, it feels like there's elite coaches at so many stops, but how cool and interesting has it been for you to see the evolution of this league? Because again, at one point, I don't know that basketball was, I don't want to say taken as seriously, but it's on a different level now, right? I mean, the league is so deep. We're talking about 8, 9, maybe 10 teams making the SEC or the NCAA tournament. Now you're adding Texas and Oklahoma. So the league is as deep as any now in the national landscape.
Yeah, like you said, it's coaches. It's coaches. And the perfect example is a place like Auburn. Right. I mean, they rolled the dice on Bruce Pearl and it's completely worked. I mean, he's been there for 10 years and taken them to 4 tournaments. They're on the doorstep right now of being a top 10 team nationally. And, look at the coaches before him. Jeff Lebo was terrible. Tony Barbee was terrible. But you go out and get a guy that fits Auburn, right? Rallies the fan base and he wins at the same time. And Nate Oates, Greg Byrne, listen, when he hired Nate Oates, I was like, what the hell is he doing? Why is he getting this dude that is a Midwest guy? He's from Michigan. He's coached at Buffalo. Why would you do this? But again, Nate Oates, a different style, plays up and down, got a big-time personality, will go out there and sell, will fight, all of it. And again, I mean, even going back to, listen, it didn't work great, but like they hired, Mississippi State goes and hires Ben Howland. He was a big name at that time. He had gone to 3 straight Final Fours with UCLA. So it's just been different. It's been different. And, to me, again, you look up and down the roster of coaches. Rick Barnes, what he's done at Tennessee has been incredible. And now it's all about NIL. And most of the teams, let's face it, in the SEC, they've got NIL because of football.
And you look at the league, and we're talking about the depth of the league, Jeff, and I think that's really been evident this season as we dive into it. That's where I want to start, not necessarily the top. We know Kentucky's going to be there. Tennessee is going to be there. You mentioned Auburn with Bruce Pearl, but the bottom of the league has been so good this year. I mean, teams like South Carolina, like Ole Miss that were picked to be cellar dwellers. I mean, I know South Carolina took a lick last night in Tuscaloosa, but I mean, who would have had those teams at 13-2 right now? Your thoughts on the jobs that both Lamont Paris at South Carolina and then Chris Beard at Ole Miss is doing in year one? That was another, like you mentioned, roll the dice higher. We know what Beard can do on the floor. Obviously, it's the off-the-court stuff you worry about. But, I mean, if folks know college basketball, watch his career, I guess we shouldn't be surprised at the success he's having so early on.
Zero, because he's done it everywhere he's been. He did it at Little Rock, got into the tournament his first year, beat Purdue. Then obviously what he did at Texas Tech was remarkable, taking them to within a basket of winning the whole thing. Then at Texas, before he was fired, I mean, you look at what he built there quickly in a year plus and setting that program up to succeed last year. Lamont Paris, a little bit more surprising. I remember being with those guys. Took my daughter on a trip down the Bahamas, and it happened to be at the time when there were a bunch of teams playing these foreign tours. in South Carolina. I was down there and we caught a little bit of them. We were going down the water slides and hanging out at the blackjack table a whole lot more than we were watching basketball in the Bahamas in the off season. But again, I wasn't sure what to think of Lamont Paris in year two. He brought in some pretty good transfers. But Michi Johnson's been really good this year. BJ Mack's been a great addition from Wofford. He's done a nice job. Like, he's got the program headed in the right direction. I wasn't sure they were going to be able to do that in a loaded SEC this year. And obviously in the second half last night, they struggled a little bit. But if you had told Lamont that they'd have 2 losses at this point in the year and really fought Clemson tooth and nail in that one in their first setback, he would have signed up in a heartbeat.
Back to the top of the league, Jeff, we go. Let's talk the Kentucky Wildcats. Coming in, we knew this was a huge year for John Calipari and that program, and that fan base is hungry to get back to the pinnacle. They haven't been in quite a while. Just talk about their team. Do you feel like they've got the group to make a Final Four appearance or maybe, win it all yet again?
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, and Cal has really struggled in the tournament lately, right? I mean, the COVID year was really tough for them. Then they lose, St. Peter's. They haven't been out of the first weekend, and I think it's been 4 years now. So these Kentucky fans are hungry because they're not used to that, especially with John Calipari at the helm, because he's going to bring in top-tier talent every single year. Well, he did it this year, but I was skeptical. Especially in the summer, because they didn't have Trey Mitchell at that point. Trey Mitchell was at West Virginia, and so was Bob Huggins. Huggins gets fired for basically intoxication issues, and Trey Mitchell transfers, and he's been a huge addition for Kentucky. Also, Antonio Reeves, maybe he was their best returning scorer at that point. He was taking classes at Illinois State. He was taking classes. He was ready to leave, but he couldn't. The rule stipulated that he wasn't able to go back to his original school, take classes, be eligible somewhere else. So he came back. Then you add in this freshman class that talented, but you just didn't know. I didn't know how they'd be together, especially Rob Dillingham and DJ Wagner. But their guards, Reed Shepherd's been awesome. Dillingham's been much more efficient than I thought he'd be. Aaron Bradshaw's coming along, and he might be the most talented of all of them. We haven't even really talked about Justin Edwards. He's a really good player too. So their ceiling is so high, and they've been so much more mature in how they play the game than I thought they would, because you look at freshmen these days, they get eaten up for the most part, unless they're the elite, because they're playing against 23, 24, 25-year-olds because of the extra COVID year. And this Kentucky team, they've had a few stumbles, but for the most part, really, really come out of the gates much better than expected.
Jeff, Eric Musselman was visibly frustrated after that blowout loss Saturday at home against Auburn. They got a big one tonight as we speak against the Georgia Bulldogs, a game in which they're an underdog in, which I wouldn't have believed that if you told me that a couple weeks ago. How disappointed have you been with the Hogs? Because that was a team I think we were talking about as one of the top teams in the SEC, could compete to win the crown. And I mean, they just look lost. There's no other way to put it.
Yeah, and usually they do early. In November and December, they struggle because Muss has all these transfers, and he's done it since his Nevada days. But at Arkansas, they've struggled, and then they just figure it out. Well, this year, I'm not sure they're going to figure it out, although they do have the talent. Like, it wouldn't shock me if they flipped it and turned it on and won 5 or 6 straight. It's getting a little bit late in the game right now. You got to be able to do it soon, because they've dug themselves a pretty good hole. But I mean, they got talent. Like, Tremont Mark is one of the best players in the league, the transfer from Houston. Brazil is one of the most talented players in the country. And now they just got the kid Menafield back, so they have a point guard. But man, that loss at home, the worst loss in the history of Bud Walton Arena to Auburn, was absolutely shocking, because I thought they would come back. Honestly, I thought they'd win that game. I really did. I thought they'd win that game at home. They have such a good home court advantage, and they needed that one desperately. So that has me thinking, like, this thing could get, if it doesn't flip quickly, it could be an ugly ending to this season for Arkansas.
And to be fair, Jeff, you weren't the only one. I also took Arkansas in that game, same line of thinking. And I think a lot of us had egg on our face. To the Tennessee Volunteers, Jeff, it's a fun team to talk about, man. I mean, that non-conference schedule, it's crazy when you go look at it, because if you're in the football grind like a lot of us, and you look at the overall record, man, Tennessee's got 3 losses. What's going on? They lost to Purdue, Kansas, and North Carolina, and
No shame.
Purdue 1-2 right at that time.
Yep.
Thoughts on the Tennessee Volunteers? Because as much as we love to talk about Kentucky, I think Tennessee makes a real argument for who the best team in the SEC is. You know that Rick Barnes coach team, they're going to play with physicality. They're a lot of fun to watch. Your thoughts on what Tennessee is and maybe their ceiling in regards to the tournament?
Yeah, they're older. I mean, that's the advantage they have over Kentucky, right? They're older and they guard a high level. And they added Dalton Connect, the transfer from Northern Colorado, who started his career in the junior college ranks. And they needed scoring desperately. And Connect is one of the better scorers, and a little bit of a surprise that he's been able to make the transition from the low major ranks as well as he has. But he's a really good athlete. He can shoot it pretty well. He can get by dudes. He's got good size. And now you're getting a healthy Zakai Ziegler. You got to remember, like, he was still coming off that injury, and it's taken time for him. But Josiah James, he's older, and they had a Gainey too, Justin's kid, Jordan, who can shoot the ball a little bit. Santiago's older. Like, they just got a good mix for the most part. My biggest question still is going to be the scoring ruts. In the NCAA tournament, Barnes just hasn't had a ton of success overall. Can this new look kind of with adding Connect, is that enough, him and Gainey, that enough to get him over the hump? Because they just seemingly always have these scoring droughts that you're just like, man. And again, those losses you talked about, they don't have a ton of like huge wins under their belt. I mean, you look at, they blew out Ole Miss. They beat Illinois. That was a good win with Terrence Shannon Jr. But it's not like they have a ton of good wins. What's really helped their numbers, like you said, if you play a lot of big boys, your numbers are going to be pretty good. Or you beat up like a team like Iowa State. Now they just ended up getting a big win over Houston last night. But before that, they're like in the top 10 in all the metrics, and they really didn't have a good win. Like they hadn't beaten anybody, but you know what they had done? They had beaten crappy teams by like 100 points and run it up. And if you do that, your metrics are going to look pretty good. And that's kind of now, unfortunately, a blueprint for some of these teams, not necessarily Iowa State, to move up in these, the net rankings and some of these other metrics.
Jeff, when you look at the SEC as a whole, right, it's been full of surprises one way or another, good or bad. What has surprised you the most? Maybe a team that's overachieved. I mean, again, we talked about what Ole Miss and South Carolina have done. I think Georgia's a team you look at too, though, at 11-3. They got a big one tonight, like we mentioned. LSU matched their win total in the SEC last night at 2, right, Jeff? 2. I mean, that just goes to show you how difficult that's been for Matt McMahon. And then maybe on the negative, I mean, again, I feel like I'm surprised at Texas A&M. They really haven't gotten it rolling under Buzz Williams. Granted, who knows? They might rattle off 15 in a row like they did last year. Missouri at 0-2. Obviously, Arkansas we've talked about. What surprised you in the SEC, both good and bad to this point?
If I had to say the biggest surprise is probably Auburn for me from a high note. Like I didn't see this coming. But again, I should have with Bruce. But every time before the year I talked to Bruce, and I think Bruce just sells low every year to me. At least to me, I know he does. He sells low and he's smart. He's done this long enough to know. Don't sell high and deliver low. To me, you sell low and overachieve, right? That's the best way to do it. So I think Auburn would be, if I had to say like my biggest surprises on the positive end, Auburn, Kentucky, South Carolina. Those would be my 3 biggest surprises on the positive side. On the negative side, Arkansas won, Texas A&M certainly would, to me, again, you got one of the best guards in the country in Wade Taylor. People, like you said, picked him second in the preseason. A lot of respect there for Buzz Williams. And then Missouri a little bit, just because, like Dennis did such a good job, Dennis Gates last year in year 1. I was still shocked. And these ADs baffle me a little bit. When you give somebody like that after 1 year, such a lucrative contract with all that guaranteed money after 1 season, like it just baffles me. Like, where else are they going? Like, where else is Dennis Gates going to go? You bid against yourself. And it's like, now again, the buyout is usually what matters, but you guaranteed him all of that money. And year 2 now has been pretty bad so far. So I just, again, some of the ADs just absolutely confuse me because I don't think they have any clue about business and like how this business works. And again, you don't bid against yourself. Like whoever gave John Calipari this contract, and that was Mitch Barnhart years ago. I get it. Cal was rolling and everything, but look at what it's done. Again, if Cal gets knocked out, let's say Kentucky loses in the first round, which I don't think they're going to, but let's say they lose in the first round this year again. Those fans will be wanting him gone in the worst way. They don't care what you do in the regular season. They just want to get to a Final Four and win a national title. They don't want to lose in the first weekend again. So, like, whatever Kentucky's doing right now, to be honest, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. What matters is, are they going to get to the Sweet 16 and beyond? And if they lose in the first round, he's owed $33 million. Still, $33 million. This is a contract that was signed, what, 6 years ago? Something like that. I just, it baffles me. And I'm sure it's the same thing in football. I mean, look at Jimbo Fisher, right? All the money that they ate for Jimbo Fisher. The dumbest thing ever. You bid against yourself, or else you say, like, listen, Dennis Gates, you want to go somewhere else? Go.
So, Jeff, you look at the SEC, the top. I think we all agree Tennessee, Kentucky, Auburn would be my top three right now. I think they're in a kind of a class of their own. Who would you say is that fourth best team? Is it Alabama? And if it's not them, who would it be?
It probably is, but it's not like Alabama's got some great resume either. That, like, I like Nate. Mark Sears has been awesome this year. Aaron Estrada was good last night, and he needs to pick up. But they've got a lot of, mid-major transfers. Those are their best players. They don't have a Brandon Miller. Sears is a mid-major kid who transferred up. Estrada, Hofstra. Grant Nelson, North Dakota State. Like, these are all mid-major guys. They don't have that high-end dude, and they miss a big. They miss a shot Bediako. That's who they miss more than anything else. But I think fourth is a little wide open. I really do. I mean, again, I think can Texas A&M get it going? Mississippi State, Chris Jans, they're in the mix. Georgia, I think the bottom is the bottom. Vandy stinks. Missouri's not going to be very good this year. Other than that, I mean, LSU, again, look at the win they had over A&M. Maybe, I mean, I don't think they're great, but they're dangerous. And even Vandy's dangerous because as bad as Stackhouse has done, and it's mostly recruiting and retention, he can coach. Like, if you give him talent, if he could retain guys, Vandy could be really good. He can't keep them.
So, Jeff, switching gears to the national perspective, and I want to ask you about this because I think it's really intriguing before we dive into the specifics of these teams. Last year was a really fun year from the standpoint of we had so many random teams in the Elite Eight, the Final Four. It wasn't just blue blood, right? FAU, the run they made, some others as well. I look at the rankings right now. Purdue, Kansas, UConn, Kentucky, North Carolina. Do you think we're going back to that where it's, because the reason everybody loves March Madness is for bracketology and upsets and we've started to see 16-1 upsets, which we never saw, 15-2s that would happen. But a lot of times it felt like year after year we got to a point where okay, Kansas is there. North Carolina is there. Kentucky's there. Like the blue blood shine. The teams, shocker, with the most talent win. Do you see the parity increasing what we saw last year where you're going to get more of these Florida Atlantics making these runs? Or do you think, this is a year? Do you think that was a one-off? Do you think it's more often than not it's going to be the blue bloods at the end of the day?
No, I don't think so this year. I don't think it'll be the case this year. I think there'll be a lot of upsets this year in the tournament. I'm not sure if FAU is going to make it to the Final Four again. I'm not going to go out on that much of a limb. Because nobody saw that coming. I remember being at FAU in Boca last year on January 31st and looking at Dusty May and being like, hey, maybe you'll make the tournament. Maybe you'll hold on and make the tournament. And I think he agreed, like, hopefully I'll make the tournament. But, he didn't see himself going to the Final Four or anything like that. But I could see, again, you could see some team like, a Dayton, an Oklahoma, who knows? I mean, some of these teams, again, that we don't think are legitimate Final Four. Wisconsin, who's probably the second best team in the Big Ten right now. You know, a Utah State. Yeah, like who knows? I just don't think there's dominant teams, and we've seen it, right? Like Purdue's good. They got the best player in the country in Zach Edey. You know, Kansas can't really shoot it, and they're not deep, but they have a Hall of Fame coach. But I could see them getting knocked out in the second round. Arizona, my alma mater, they're really good, but like, are they unbeatable? Heck no. I mean, no, absolutely not. They lost at Stanford, who's not a very good team. Now, these are road venues. Most of them that these top teams are losing. But no, Arizona lost to FAU a couple of weeks ago, right before the holiday, the Christmas break. They lost in Vegas in a pro Arizona crowd. And then FAU turns around right after that, and they lose at Florida Gulf Coast, who's terrible. They had 2 Division I wins at that time. And then they lose last week again at Charlotte. So it just, and they've also lost at home to Bryant. So like, it just goes to show you again, how fragile it is in college basketball, a little more than college football, I think, because you got so many games, you know, that's part of it. In football, you're getting up for 1 game a week. In college basketball, you've got, you know, 2, maybe 3 games in a week. And it's a little bit, I think, harder to stay focused and not look past a game to the next one than it is in football.
So looking at the national landscape, Jeff, on that note, not trying to put you on the spot here, but when we talk Final Four, I mean, again, you mentioned Purdue. It's funny, we look at these rankings, Purdue, number 1, Houston, number 2. They both lost last night, right, in upset fashion. But if you had to narrow it down, if you have 4 that you're like right now you feel good about locking in, or maybe you got 6 or 8 teams, who are those teams on top of your mind? You're like, I feel really good they're going to make a run, go to the Final Four. Or is that a silly question because it's just a crapshoot and we have no idea?
I mean, no, it's not ridiculous. It's just like, I don't have utmost confidence in anybody.
I'm
You
not
know,
asking for the gambling numbers. I'm just asking for a best guess here.
yeah, I mean, I like Kentucky, and I never thought I'd say that going into the year, but I like Kentucky. I still like Purdue. I still like Houston. I still like Arizona. I like Marquette. I like UConn. You know, Carolina and Duke are in the mix there. Kansas, I don't think can win it all. Like a lot of, you know, there's some of these teams. I just don't think Kansas can win it all because I don't think they shoot it well enough to win it all and have enough depth. I think they got 4 dudes that they're relying on. You know, to me, you need point guard play, you need enough shooting, and you need a pretty good coach. You know, and if you have a great coach, that makes it even better. So, you know, I still think there's 10, 12 teams that can win the whole thing, but I think there's like 30 teams that can win 4 straight and get to the Final Four.
Jeff, is there a better 2 days in sports than the first 2 days of March Madness?
No. I mean, not when it delivers, right? I mean, there's sometimes when a day just doesn't deliver, you know, the buzzer beaters and the upsets. But when you have a couple, you know, I remember years ago in Tampa, I had one day, and I try to jump around and see as many games as I can. So I don't like to sit there in the off day. So I was in Tampa and I saw 4 upsets in the day, 4 straight. And I remember I was writing at the time, and first one happens, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna write a story, and then I'll be done for the rest of this session. I could just watch the second game and enjoy it. Second game happens, upset, right again. Then I'm like, all right, I'm done. Second session, gonna just relax tonight, right? Third game, upset, got to write again. Fourth game, upset. Had to do a whole wrap up on the day. It was, but again, it's a blast. Like that. That's the beauty of the tournament. That's. I think everybody. That's what you want in the first week, right? You want that first weekend to be about Cinderella stories, buzzer beaters, upsets, and then generally, what you want are the big boys to advance to the Final Four.
Jeff Goodman, a legend in his own right. Fantastic work. Jeff, I've watched from afar for so long. Love what you do, man. Again, I would say for my money's worth, you're the best in the business when it comes to college basketball. Again, I mentioned top of show, what you have going on, but let folks know what you're doing, where to find you. The Field of 68. Let folks, I was watching that last night, and I see you guys have a newsletter you can subscribe to. So give everybody just an idea of what's going on, how they can follow you, all the exciting stuff you guys have rocking right now.
Yeah, we started 3 years ago, myself and Rob Doster, and it basically fills a void in college basketball. Every single night, we have Field of 68 After Dark on, 11 o'clock Eastern, streaming on on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it now, YouTube. It's on Sirius Radio as well. We have all sorts of other things, like you said, a newsletter delivered to your email every single morning. We have other podcasts. Myself and Robbie Hummel do a pod every single week, where actually I have to pay up a bet. Since I went to Arizona, he went to Purdue. Purdue beat Arizona a few weeks ago. The bet, Chris, was that I have to wear Robbie Hummel's Purdue jersey for a day. But the worst part is, and he did this after the fact. It was a sly move by Hummel. He said, he put it in afterwards that I can't wear an undershirt under it. So I just got to go, so I'm trying to lift weights over here in between, games or whatever, so I don't make myself look too ridiculous when I have to do this at the Final Four in Arizona. It's not going to be pretty. Also write for the Messenger. Also do a show every weekday with Doug Gottlieb on Stadium from 1 till 1:30 Eastern. So a lot of hoops, and I appreciate you having me on. And hopefully, again, SEC is fun right now in hoops. Really fun.
Jeff, you're the man. I appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the college basketball season. We will definitely do it again soon, though, my friend. I appreciate you.
You got it, man.